Driving it home with Patti Vasquez, Patti Vasquez. From global conflicts to greenhouse gases, the folks refusing to wear masks says, and politicians getting caught grabbing asses says, she's driving it home with Patti Vasquez.
Hello, and thank you so much for joining us. And a wonderful welcome to our friends listening on KTNF 950 AM in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the surrounding area. Joining us here on WCPT 820 in the Chicagoland area and beyond, because we're also online. You can watch our live stream. And I'm so excited that you're here for this conversation, because we are welcoming back Professor Barry Maurer to talk about the cult of death and Trumpers and all things crazy. Hey, Professor, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I don't follow every single news story about the former president. How are you doing as far as like everything?
Well, I like to say I'm personally doing well, even though the world is going off a cliff. So there is a disconnect.
Yes, I've been thinking about this because there's so much happening on college campuses, and there's this energy that's gaining a lot of momentum, and especially with young voters. And I don't know what we can do on this side, of the conversation to figure out what the messaging is, what the president needs to do. But we are talking a lot about how because so many people spend time. It's basically like when you're in the mud with your car and you hit the gas and you think that'll get you out of the mud. We think that like reasoning with Trump supporters and far right-wing conservatives is the way to go. And I think you and I are of the mind like we can't spend our time doing that and getting deeper in the mud, can we?
No. I would say mostly it's a waste of time. And part of there's what's called the troll trap, where it's the pretense that we're going to have a rational conversation, and you end up getting mud on yourself and wasting your time. There are people who are really good at that, like Jonah Goldberg. They pretend like they're going to have a rational conversation with you, but there's actually no commitment on their part to behave in good faith or to change their mind in the face of overwhelming evidence, which we would expect if it was a real conversation. So,
right.
No, there's a lot of traps, and don't get into traps. But also, we need to be able to change our minds and let that be a part of our identity, even if it's not part of the identity of people on the other side.
Right.
So it's hard to be open-minded in a society that's very much, polarized, but it is possible.
I talk about that quite a bit when someone, points out a piece of information that is in contrast with what I had previously thought or an opinion I had, and it changes the way I look at something. I'm grateful for being corrected. I'm open to that. It doesn't feel great. I get that. I think people are too tied into their identity and their politics, and that's where they dig in so hard that if this is wrong, then what does that say about the rest of my existence? That's a big part of it, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So we call that identity protective cognition. It's a fancy term that means you've made a belief a core part of your identity. And there are studies on this that show that, generally speaking, if a belief isn't part of your identity, you're willing to change your mind about it. Like if you're to guess how many pennies are in a jar and you're off by 1,000 and someone tells you, no, the actual number is this, we'll count them if you want, but, you're likely to just accept that you were wrong. Whereas if someone tells you, Trump has committed numerous crimes and there's overwhelming evidence, if that's part of their identity to reject it, they will, no matter how much evidence is presented and what kind. So, there's certain kinds of topics people get that identity protective cognition comes up about. And certain other ones don't seem to get in people's minds in the same way, but politics is definitely one. And just to continue on that, I read something recently that said that Americans are more likely to change religions than they are to change their party identification.
Wow. I was just going to ask you about religion and the role this plays and how Republicans have really, I think, in a monstrous way, made it a just horrible representation of what Christianity is, in my mind. Everything that they do seems to be in contrast of what the teachings of Christ say. And there was a pastor, there's a video that's going around, a Pentecostal pastor, but who demanded accountability for Trump and January 6th rioters, talks about, voting is not spiritual. Voting is a civic privilege, essentially, right? Do not, and he went on about how, shame on people who bought this Bible that has the Constitution and you think you're doing a good thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was refreshing to hear,
Yeah.
More of that.
Well, I think I think there's a need to take back religion, take back patriotism, take back all these things that have been sort of colonized by the right. And it's okay to have, to follow religious belief. I personally, just to put it out, I'm not religious, and would identify more as an atheist, to be frank. But that doesn't mean I don't think Jesus had great teachings, and so did Buddha, and so do many of the great leaders of religions. And it's worth taking to heart what they taught in terms of how to live a good life and be a good human. But very often these religions become corrupted, as we know, and so do politics. But it's not necessarily that we have to throw them out. It's the question of, is something savable, salvageable from these things? And certainly there is. There are some great traditions within Christianity, and I would just point to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., for example, and say, well, he managed to find a way to not reproduce these slaveholders' Christianity, but a humanist Christianity that called for rebellion against domination. And, it's one question is that a truer form of Christianity? Well, I would believe it is. So I think it's up to people to stake out and get involved in these, we call these discourses, right? There's discourses within religion, within politics, and to reclaim some of these discourses that have been basically, I would say, stolen by the right wing.
That's absolutely how I feel, and I feel like I'm similar in the sense that I appreciate the teachings. I was raised, I was Mormon until I was about 10. Then if you're going to drown a girl, at least let her hold her nose. And I was like, this isn't for me, because that's how they baptized me. Uh-huh. And so I became a Lutheran, and I really liked the potluck dinners; those were fun. And I went to the school, and the hot lunches on Tuesdays were great. I was married in the Catholic Church, but I don't recognize anything that people are putting out there as a brand of Christianity when they're just so hateful. I mean, when there's a shooting in Colorado at a bar that does drag brunches because they can't tolerate the idea of anyone expressing themselves, and you have right wing, in this death cult cheering that on and basically saying, "What do you expect?" I don't recognize that as a form of Christianity at all. I might be wrong about that. I don't think I am.
Well, no, you're not. No. But, the fact of, particularly within Catholicism, the attraction to Jesus is that he is masculine and feminine. And the way he's depicted is almost as a, ambiguously sexed character with long hair and fine features and not purely paternal but more maternal set of values and way of being in the world. And that's the central figure of your religion, is actually, I would say, a cross-dresser, if not a transsexual, and the representation of him is not purely spiritual, but also erotic in a sense. He's meant to be a figure that is pleasing, attractive. There's some twisted stuff with the fetishism of him suffering on the cross, I think. But in general, it's meant to appeal to the senses. It's meant to appeal to, the reason why there's brides of Jesus and so on is that he's meant to be not just a spiritual presence, but a physical one as well. I'm getting into theology here.
Yeah. Better you than me. No, please.
Yeah. But the point is, the central figure of Christianity is sexually ambiguous. And so the people claiming to fight for, the strict binary of the sexes just don't even recognize that it's the core of their own religion. And not only that, but Jesus, he didn't hang out with people who were real, moral about their sexuality in right-wing terms. He hung out with prostitutes and people who were down and out and had bad habits and all sorts of things like that. And otherwise he would have just hung out with the Roman elite,
right.
Or whatever, but that was not his thing. He was into being with the people who were marginalized. So the exact opposite of what the Christian right is preaching. Jesus would have probably been right there with the drag performers, not necessarily participating in the show, but he would have seen no reason to reject them as people.
Yeah, I mean, Trump would be more likely to hang out with Pontius Pilate than he would with Christ, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, if we're going there, yeah.
I'll go there.
Okay.
I will go there. We are talking to Dr. Barry Maurer. He's the author of Deadly Delusions, Right-Wing Death Cult. It's available on Amazon, and a lot of great reviews. I'm grateful for that. Do you get are there people that you clearly know have not read the book that just, leave angry troll reviews?
Well, there's one up on there that I like particularly well. If someone did read the book, I guess, got the book as a present and said it was the most unwanted gift, and they threw it out. And they said that if I want socialism so bad, I should move to France and see if I'm free there. So I thought, France, I've been to France. It's not that bad. But anyway, that's another issue.
Oh, I'm on it. But, a gift deposited in the circular file. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, my goodness gracious. Yeah. It's, again, cite in the Bible where you're wrong about what the right wing have done with Christianity. It's just, it's madness. We're hanging out with Dr. Barry Maurer. He's the author of Deadly Delusions, Right-Wing Death Cult. And you can get a copy, and you don't have to put it in your circular file. We'll talk more with the professor when we come back on WCPT 820 Heartland Signal.
Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Hey there, it's your guy Warren Price from European and U.S. Collision Repair, a division of Technocraft Body Shops. We specialize in automobile and truck repair as well as normal automobile maintenance. With our highly skilled technicians and environmentally friendly materials, we strive for quality. Call 773-248-1200. That's 773-248-1200 or EuropeanUS.com.
You're listening to Driving It Home with Patti Vasquez on WCPT 820.
Thank you so much for joining us as we drive it home. Joining us by phone is Dr. Barry Maurer. He's the author of Deadly Delusions, Right-Wing Death Cult. And coming up in a little bit, we're going to ask how MAGA and Swifties if they have anything in common. We have questions, Professor. Before we do that, if you don't mind, I'm going to take a call from a listener I think wants to talk about one of the comments that we covered in regards to the fetishization of the Christ figure. Hold on one second. Hey, Jim, what's on your mind, my friend?
Hi, Patty and Barry. The fetish of the crucifixion is 2,000 years old, And I will wager that after we're all gone, Barry, you, me, Patty, it'll still be a fetish 2,000 years from now. That I can guarantee you. So as far as the fetish is concerned, that's a pretty powerful fetish to have for 2,000 years. And you have martyrs that went to their death over the fetish. So that doesn't make any sense to me at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my comment.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it. You know, I've been thinking about this, Professor. I've been thinking about the damage that people are doing to Christianity by bastardizing the teachings of Christ. I have a feeling that it's actually driving people away. We see that attendance in churches on Sundays has dropped significantly, and I think it's for the first time in our history, less than half of the population identifies as being Christian or religious, maybe.
Yeah, the increasing number of people who call themselves nuns, and that's not N-U-N, that's N-O-N-E, meaning they don't identify with any particular religion. And quite a number of those people will say that they're spiritual, but not, not belonging to an institution or an organization of religion. And part of that comes, I think, from the fact that there's really no integrity in many churches when it comes to politics, that they've thrown themselves fully into the political realm, even though that's unconstitutional as far as their tax base. They're supposed to pay taxes if they're a political organization and not a church, but many of them are being run now as political organizations that just happen to be churches. And many people, frankly, see through that and don't like it and can't blame them. So, but particularly when they see the hypocrisy between what the religious values are purported to be and what the political values are that the church is actually pursuing. Yeah. So I don't blame people for their turning away. But part of the problem is, where do people go if the churches are losing trust? And I think it's sort of general throughout the societies that all the institutions are losing trust. And it's a very bad sign. If some of the institutions losing trust are unhealthy institutions and should lose trust. So let me be clear about that. But some institutions that are losing trust, like universities, for example, actually deserve far more trust than they're getting. And so it's the general sense of mistrust that is kind of collapsing, it causing or leading us to much, much bigger problems. And I would say that that's engineered in a lot of ways. It's a form of propaganda that was perfected in Russia, actually, by propagandist there named Vladislav Surkov, who worked for Putin. He was his vice minister. But the idea was to cause so much chaos, confusion, and mistrust in institutions that people no longer believed in anything or knew what was true at all. And they would then turn to someone who promised to save them from this confusion and darkness. And that's where the dictator comes in. So in a lot of ways, Trump profits from the fact that we've been losing trust in our institutions. And what we have to do is invest trust in institutions that are, generally speaking, trustworthy, not saying they're perfect, but that in general they're trustworthy. And we need to build new institutions to take the place of old ones. So if the churches are corrupt, then the proper thing to do is to develop alternatives to that, whether it's religion or it doesn't have to be religion, but some place where people feel like they can trust the institution, it's living up to its values, and it's giving back to the people who are involved.
I'm seeing a lot of people who are turning to labor unions. We're seeing the membership grow.
Yes.
We're seeing, these grassroots efforts. We saw the victory in Tennessee with the VW plant there. I know that there's a Mercedes plant in Alabama, which will be next as far as voting and other, because, one of the things I don't think we talked about last time is billionaires and these big corporations, they all benefit from all the infighting, all the nonsense that's going on at our level with the working class, and whether it's patriotism and religion, they want us at each other's throats because it only benefits them, doesn't it?
To a certain extent, I think it does. There's been a huge amount of consolidation over the past few decades, and now there's very few corporations. So, Amazon, for example, is such a behemoth that it's in literally every area of the economy, and they can sort of profit depending on, profit no matter what direction the society goes in, or whether the economy shifts this way or that. They have enough power that they can make their way through that, and they're very anti-union, of course. But there is a point. Like if you look at the history of fascism, for example, big businesses usually support it and are in favor of it because they think they can kind of. Because generally speaking, the fascist wants to crush unions too, and wants to eliminate regulations and things like that on corporations. But in the end, they end up not good for business. Let's just put it that way. And so the corporations lined up behind Hitler in Germany, but he took away their power once he had developed his own sufficient power. I suspect the same thing is true of corporations that support Trump in this country, that if he is able to gain the power he wants, he will wield it over them and not be their tool. And another point I would raise is this was already tried in the United States in the 1930s when there was an attempted coup against Roosevelt, led by the DuPont Corporation, and they had tried to replace Roosevelt with this Marine general named Smedley Butler, but Smedley didn't want to play, so history didn't go that way. But the point is, it's already been tried, and corporations are, as the movie The Corporation showed us in the late 90s when it came out, the corporation is a psychopath. The personality of the corporation, and we know in this country corporations are legally persons, that if you were to analyze them according to the diagnostic criteria for psychopathy, they would meet every single criteria for psychopathy. And that's by design. It's required, mandated legally because they are they serve only one group, and that is shareholders. They're legally mandated to share to shareholders' interests above any other interests, and that includes the environment, workers, consumers, animals, whatever.
I'm sorry, where did this come from? Was this, I'm guessing, under Reagan? What that shareholders are above all legally?
That is corporate law, yes. That the corporation serves the interests of shareholders above any other interests. That is corporate law. And in fact, the corporation can be legally liable if it's found to not have served the interests of shareholders primarily. So, regulation can be used to blunt that a bit and say the corporation must protect workers or must protect consumers or must protect the environment. But they must do that in spite of their corporate mission, which is to reward shareholders, and not because of their corporate mission. So that is American corporate law in a nutshell. And
corporations are people, so somehow that worked out very oddly if they also have different laws than the rest of us have, because we can't get away with the kinds of things that they do.
Right. Well,
I'm just saying.
Right.
It's a lot of screaming in my head.
I know.
What? Okay. I mean, look, we didn't have you on to make me feel better. We're being very honest and
that's a different doctor.
Exactly. We are hanging out with Dr. Barry Maurer. We're going to take a break here and continue our conversation in just a moment. You can pick up his book. We have a listener who has purchased your, I believe, or I don't know if they bought your book, but we're very excited that they're calling in. We're going to take their call when we come back. We also want to talk about Swifties and MAGAs. What do you call? Okay. I know you call it the death cult, but what else do you call the Trumpers?
Yeah, Trumpsters, something like that.
All right, that works. Maybe. The book is Deadly Delusions, Right-Wing Death Cult. Let's take a break here. We'll continue our conversation with Professor Barry Maurer in a moment on WCPT 820, Heartland Signal.
Because facts matter. You're listening to WCPT 820.
Hi, this is Kirk Bankstead from the Minocqua Brewing Company, and I sell Choice Hard Seltzer, an all-natural grapefruit-flavored booze that you can enjoy for only 100 calories a can. Percentage of the proceeds of every can of Choice Hard Seltzer you buy goes to reproductive rights organizations in the Chicagoland area. Enjoy a light, refreshing hard seltzer this summer and support reproductive freedom at the same time.
Buy yours at Beer on the Wall, Arlington Heights, Woodman's in Bloomingdale, Kenwood Liquors in Homer Glen, and more to come. Must be 21. Please drink responsibly.
You're listening to Driving It Home with Patti Vasquez on WCPT 820.
We are so grateful that you're joining us as we drive it home, and joining us on the air is Professor Barry Maurer. He has written the book Deadly. Hold on a second. I'm going through some family stuff. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you're in the middle of something professionally and a family member is doing something strange, and mine happens to be in the death cult, so I'm trying not to pay attention to him.
Oh.
So I don't want to deal with it.
I'm sorry.
Me too. We are on the air with Professor Barry Maurer, who has written a book that Judy and Niles has picked this up. Judy wants to talk to you about your book, Professor. Here's Judy. Hey, Judy, what's on your mind, my friend?
Hi, Patty. Yes, I do have his book, trying to figure out my relatives.
Oh, good luck.
And I actually, in most cases, I absolutely love them dearly. When my sister came in from France and wanted to stay in the cottage, I had to go up with clean sheets and make all the beds. And when I got there, they were already in there because we all have keys. And they were mopping the floor, and they had washed one of the curtains because they thought it needed it. And, I mean, they were just fabulous, and they always are. They are there for us. But, I don't know how deeply they're in it. And I made Patty late the other day by telling her that I had called my one cousin and decided to just say, "Why do you do this? Why do you vote Republican?" And he said, "Tradition."
Oh, yeah.
Is that it? That's it? And so, we got it all out in the open. So I do think sometimes you have to take a chance and just say, if he had been belligerent or anything, I would have just dropped it. But now we are back. And I love this thing where you said, progressives often fail to understand how an educated person can believe nonsense, such as climate denial. And I do, because as lovely as they are, our lake was super high like 3 years ago. I mean, high. Mm-hmm. It was in their houses in some cases. I'm on a hill. Yeah. But they still don't believe it. They say, well, weather changes. Just not like this.
Judy brings up a good point, denial. Professor. Yeah, yes, the denial part of it, and even when confronted with everything, whether it's someone who says I'm law and order. Well, Trump was found guilty of fraud. He's held liable for rape. He's and libel. He's on trial right now for these payments to keep a porn star quiet about a relationship. Well, that doesn't bother me. But so it's law and order for other people, regardless of what the facts are. None faced with reality means nothing in a cult, does it?
No, and this just goes into the history of domination, which is the law binds thee and not me. It's the I think I talked about this last time I was on the show. That's this notion of sovereignty, right? So the sovereign makes the laws, but is not bound by the laws. And that's the ideology of the right, whereas the left believes that everyone is equal under the law, although, of course, we have no perfect systems and we need to keep working on that. But that's a fundamentally different philosophical position from the right wing, which believes very much in sovereignty. And that, it just doesn't end well, sovereignty. It ends up with things like slavery, genocide, stuff like that. It just isn't going to end well. The law has to apply to everyone, and the more equal you can make it, the better. So I also believe in accountability, which is different from kind of this right-wing notion of, you violated some law and therefore you've got this, you should be punished for life. You should never be allowed to vote, whatever. People should be able to reform, make restitution, and become full citizens again. Maybe there would be some exceptions in the case of, the highest crimes like genocide and treason and things like that. But essentially, we don't want a society that I don't want a society where we're throwing people away because they did drugs, or there's all sorts of crimes where people are black marked for life, and then we're not punishing crimes that literally attack our institutions and degrade our society in very fundamental ways. I think that's a huge mismatch, and it's been engineered to be that way. People in power have engineered it so that they generally don't face consequences, and the people who are bound by the law, who are poor people, generally face enormous consequences. So, I don't know why there would be right-wing poor people, but there are. Part of me thinks, and I remember I had a roommate once who was in grad school. He was poor. His family wasn't poor, but he was poor like I was. You go to the store and you buy your ramen noodles and you try and get through school. And he believed that he was different from all the people who lived around us, fundamentally, because he believed one day he would be rich. And I said, whether or not that's true, you're one of us, and you should identify with us, and not with this I want to be a sovereign in the future kind of thing. But I think a lot of people are mistaken. They believe they're caught up in such a way that they believe that they're part of something bigger than themselves. They're part of sovereignty is seen as a form of escape from the earthly realm, right, from the gravity that pulls us down. And the sovereign becomes then halfway to heaven, right? They're not bound by earthly rules. They don't have to abide by the same things that we abide by because they've escaped the gravity of the earth. And we go along with them when we aid them in their journey upwards, and we're pulled along into the sphere of glory. I'm mocking all this, of course, but that's the ideology. Instead of saying, you know what, I should make common cause with the people I work with the people who live around me, with with other consumers, with people who need health care. I should make common cause with the people who are living in the same conditions that I'm living in,
right,
rather than identify with some, bogus sovereign. But it's a psychological. This is why I try to argue that politics is only partly politics.
Yeah.
When it comes to the right wing, it's not politics, it's psychology is the problem, because it's not fundamentally a political movement. It's a psychological disorder on a mass scale. And that's what people don't understand. A cult is a mass delusion. It's a mass mental illness. It is not a political expression. It just happens to be in the realm of politics. That's how it manifests itself. but it is not fundamentally political. It's fundamentally psychological.
Yeah, I agree with that. Judy, would you leave a review for Dr. Barry Mauer's book?
Well, I've only up to about, 92 or something, where he has that lovely quote. Are they crazy, or are they delusional, or are they? Yeah. And that's what I wonder. These are lovely people. However,
yes.
And one time when it did come up and we couldn't avoid it, my cousin's daughter is married to a black man. He's a Haitian. And I do sometimes think that they are racist in some way, because when I was there, there was this young man there, quite obvious that he was very black, and we were all not, but nobody introduced him to me. I kept trying to maneuver it so that I could stick out my hand and say, "Hi, I'm Cousin Judy. Who are you?" But I wasn't able to manufacture that until later on. Like the next time I saw them, they said, "Oh, that was his son-in-law," but they didn't introduce him. So I think something's there, but I was unable to, because they went and helped them when she had a second baby. They feel they are not racist. In fact, his wife said, "How dare anyone say that to us?" Right. We went and helped him.
Right. Well, and this is, very true. The right-wing people around me are generally very nice people, very friendly people. But so it's hard to imagine that they are also mentally ill, in a death cult, and so on. And what I would like to say to that is that we assume different roles, and we play, we have different personas in different situations. And so people who can be very, very nice and friendly and kind to each other in one situation can be absolutely monsters in other situations. And the film I think I mentioned this last time. The film, what was it? This film that's about Auschwitz that's out now, won an Academy Award, depicts this family living right next door to Auschwitz. Literally, their back wall is the wall of Auschwitz, and the father of the family is the camp commander. And generally, they're nice, friendly people to each other and to their friends, right? But also, the commander is murdering 1 million people on the other side of the wall,
right?
And the point is that we are very good at compartmentalizing.
Yes,
we can compartmentalize and say that I'm a good person, and what I do over there is subject to a different set of rules and shouldn't be evaluated according to the standard set of rules. So often it comes to, I'm not racist, but you hear the word "but" and you're like, yeah, you're racist. There's no "but." Stop before "but." And the problem is, and this actually came up at work today, where I work as a professor. There's a new state law that says that in certain classes, general education classes, we can't teach that the United States is inherently racist or has racist institutions that have been preserved over time. And the solution to that, according to the administration, is that we teach about particular events and people and instances and let students draw their own conclusion. And I said, well, that's fine, except for the fact that there are things like policies that have, or just institutions that have existed forever, as long as Europeans have been in North America. For example, we are settlers or descendants of settlers who have displaced the native people. That has not changed since the beginning. And it's maybe changed in particular, nuanced ways here and there, but it's generally true. also since the founding of the United States, the power given to the slave states and then the former slave states is disproportionately higher than other states. That was specifically put in the Constitution to maintain slavery, and then later it was preserved to disenfranchise non-whites. And so to say that I'm not racist and yet to live and participate in a society that has racist institutions that perpetuate racism every day, there's a disconnect. So unless we recognize that, we need to work up, like the Senate is designed in the Constitution to be a racist institution by its design. And so, that's something that needs to be addressed. And if we're not addressing it, there's a problem.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
You go.
I wanted to bring up the Swiftie thing, so let's talk about that. So the question was, and I got this email, what's the difference between, Swifties and Trumpers? And can we really, they're both organized around a central figure, right? And they both, so this sort of mass group, they're really devoted. One might say they're even kind of possessed in a way, with zeal. And, but there's very little overlap between the two, I would say. And in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, there is a disorder called possession disorder, which is grouped under what's called dissociative identity disorder. Basically, it means we have different personalities that can take over, almost like you become like a zombie is a different personality, or addicts can have an addict personality that takes over. And when personalities take over like that, you don't always live according to your best values. But there's nothing inherently wrong with the values of the average Swiftie. They are music fans who like a particular musical performer, and they're expressing their musical taste. And also that it's not just musical. I mean, Swift represents a lifestyle, a brand, a set of values, a way of being in the world. But again, there's nothing necessarily pathological about that. We are under states of possession in different times, maybe some people more than others. But the possession that Trumpers are under is a dangerous possession. That's a possession that makes people do things contrary to any civilized values. It causes enormous suffering for other people, and very frequently for themselves. We see many times Trumpers who are willing to, give up their jobs, have their families leave them, or lose their jobs because of their behavior, go to jail for Trump, suffer humiliation for Trump, and that's all considered kind of like a rite of passage. Like you're really one of us if you've sacrificed for this man, who is not a man anymore. He's now being touted as Jesus or some sort of semi-divine figure. And so that is absolutely pathological. I don't hear people in the Swift camp who say that she's not human. And I would go further and say that Swifties are critical. They don't like every single song or everything that Taylor Swift has done.
We saw that this week.
Whereas there's not much criticism of Trump from within the camp other than very, very minor stuff like, sometimes I don't like his tweets. That's not a sufficient critique. That's not, of a man who's called for mass murders and purging the country and destroying democracy and working for Putin and all the things he's done. Complaining about his tweets is not sufficient. I'm sorry, that does not give you a pass at all. That doesn't create critical distance. Whereas fans actually do have critical distance. So that's what I wanted to say about
Excellent.
all that.
Thank you for breaking. Yeah, I know. I've seen memes now too, using Swifties to denigrate both liberals and because they'll show these girls in the outfits by how much tickets cost, but they have student debt and they can spend money on that. But they're being used by MAGA too in order to denigrate anything that liberals do. I need to take a break, and one texter did want to let you know that it was the movie is The Zone of Interest to remind us. I couldn't think of it either. Yes. Judy, thank you so much for calling. Judy, have a great evening.
It's the movie is The Boy in the Striped Pajamas.
That's another one. But the movie that Professor Maurer was talking about was The Zone of Interest, which won an Academy Award recently.
Aha.
Yes.
Okay, I'll see if I can see it. Bye-bye. I don't want to make you late again.
It's not going to be you this time because I have to get a break, and there's 2 callers. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get to it. We're going to have you back, Professor, because the calls are coming in. Let me take a break and see if we still have time when we come back on WCPT 820, Heartland Signal.
Dive deeper into the heart of the news and stories at WCPT 820 and across the Midwest by checking out our website, heartlandsignal.com.
It's the coverage I can count on every time.
For the latest news updates, in-depth analysis, compelling stories, comprehensive election coverage, live streams, and thought-provoking opinions, head to heartlandsignal.com.
When I need to know, they're there.
They keep me informed and updated wherever I am.
Stay informed with WCPT 820, your go-to source for where facts matter.
Hey Google, play WCPT.
Streaming Chicago's progressive talk from TuneIn.
And we are on the phone with Professor Barry Maurer. That's Mauer. I recommend that you Google him so you can get to some of his PDFs online. Check out his page for academia at UCF. Because I want to get to Sherry's call. Earl, I don't think. Let me see if I have time because I've got Sherry from Las Vegas on the line with us. Sherry, you're on with Professor Maurer. What's on your mind, Sherry?
Hi there. I think that it all comes down to an individual choice. Either you don't like people who's not into your norm, or you don't.
Okay.
I think the psychological stuff is like nonsense.
Okay. Thank you so much for calling, Sherry. Earl from Hyde Park is on the line with us. Earl, I've got about a minute left. What's on your mind, Earl?
Quickly, I was going to ask him, I fundamentally believe that a difference between a progressive and a conservative is that I believe that government has to be large enough to hold corporations in account, and Republicans want to shrink government and to the size that it will fit into a bathtub and drown it. So I was just wondering if you wanted to have a quick second or two on that.
I think we'll have to put a pin in that one for next month because we've asked Professor Maurer to get us through this year, and in the sense that, like as I mentioned, Professor, it's not the most positive stuff, but I think it helps us go. Okay, we're not crazy thinking that they're crazy. I think it's the best way to put it, Professor. Earl, I want to invite you to call back when I have the professor on next month. Does that sound good?
Alrighty, thank you.
I'm sorry about that. Thank you. Because, Professor, we're out of time, and I wanted to make sure I got them on the air. I'm just going to go ahead and say I disagree with Sherry, and that's all we need to say there, right?
Yeah. It's not a question of just liking or disliking people. No. And mental illness exists. It is real. It's not just made up.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, exactly.
And I totally agree with your second caller. Yes, government needs to get involved with managing corporations. So, yes, thank you.
Excellent. So again, the book is available on Amazon. You can find Professor Barry Maurer online and check out the work that he has done. Again, the book is Deadly Delusions, correct? I've lost the title in front of me. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor. We'll talk to you next month.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You.
It's a great conversation. Thank you, Lady B. Mike Crute's up next with Devil's Advocate. Bye, everybody.